Right. It's thanks to a glaring spotlight from the media. Okay, it was us. And a big reaction from you. A woman living in deplorable conditions in Vancouver has a new place to call home. And that is our big story tonight. I got to tell you, there are times that we find a situation so obviously wrong, so out of line with what should be, that it really drives us crazy. And then we bring it to you to see if the community can help. That's what happened a few weeks ago when we found a Vancouver woman's trailer home trashed. It had a hole in the ceiling, no working toilet, along with mold and mildew. And to top it all off, the landlord would not make any repairs she was renting. And then Kyla Boshi and you all got involved. Here's an update.
Our beautiful kitchen with no hole in it.
What once seemed like a dream is now home for Casey Jewell. The Vancouver woman moved into a freshly painted mobile home last week.
Much better. Much better.
We first met Casey in February at the hidden RV and mobile home park north of Vancouver. The unit she was renting was falling apart, and no one would fix it.
Think people should be living in these kind of conditions?
No. No. Nobody should be living in this.
At the time, she had no running water. The heater had broken, the toilet stopped working, and there was a hole in the kitchen ceiling.
Because when it rains, it drips. It's like got all these buckets.
Casey and her son had complained to management repeatedly. They'd sent emails and taken photos, but nothing seemed to change. Until...
And when you got contact with them, that's when they're like, oh, we better do something.
Our story, along with public outcry, prompted her landlord to find Casey a new place to call home, just around the corner. It's got a nice kitchen with cabinets and appliances, heating and air conditioning, new flooring, and unlike her old place, a working toilet.
Music to my ears.
Casey considers herself lucky. There are other low-income renters who don't have the same support. Donors have contributed more than $12,000 to help Casey cover back rent and expenses.
Thank you. Thank you for your prayers.
Casey's story also helped highlight a loophole in Washington law. She'd been paying her monthly rent, along with $50 extra, after falling behind during the pandemic. In Washington, if you're behind on rent, you can't force your landlord to make necessary fixes, explained Carl Snodgrass of Northwest Justice Project.
It's one of those things that I can't believe we created a system that does that.
A proposal before the Washington state legislature would have closed the loophole, but the House bill never got a hearing during the 2024 short session. Representative Strom Peterson said he'll try again next year.
I think that is the next logical step to make sure that, those kind of really bad actors, kind of slumlords for lack of a better term, really need to be held accountable. And this is the way we can do it.
Many low-income renters live in poor conditions like Casey did because of the Washington law. They can't force their landlord to make necessary repairs. She understands the hardship and is especially grateful to have a new place to call home.
I got my happy ending.
Kyle's with me now. What about that $12,000? Does that cover the back rent?
It could be. That's being disputed right now. She's being represented by a nonprofit, Northwest Justice Project. They're in negotiations with the landlord about that back rent that she owes. It's several $1,000s. They argue she shouldn't have to pay, or it should be reduced significantly because of the conditions she was living in for quite some time.
Yeah, and you had a chance to talk to the landlord. What do you have to say about it?
Well, they emailed late today. They're taking credit for moving her into a new mobile home and said they work with a nonprofit to get her furnishings and also fix the place up a little bit. But obviously the situation is what it is.
Yeah, I wonder if they knew that it was as bad as it was.
Well, it's tough to ignore, especially when you see the video of that place that she was living in. It's horrible.
And I'm sure a whole different outlook on life for her now.
She really appreciates the outpouring of support from the community, not only those people who saw the story, but have gotten to know her and feel badly about her situation. And again, she's just one. There are a lot of other low-income renters facing some really challenging situations out there.
And I remember when the story first ran, we did hear from landlords that said, there's a reason this law is in place, but still, on the broad scale, it seems like that should go away. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Kyla Boshi. Great stuff as always. right, now let's talk about some of your thoughts on our big story last night. It was tolling. This week, Governor Tina Kotek told the State Transportation Commission to ditch a plan that would have tolled several spots along I-5 and I-205 in the greater Portland metro region. But while those planned tolls are no more, you should still expect a toll along the new I-5 bridge between Portland and Vancouver. And when it comes to the planned toll on the Abernathy Bridge along I-205, that's a maybe at this point. We know tolling is not a popular idea, but our story last night had many of you thinking ahead about future impacts. Greg wrote to us to say, we all know that exclusive tolling to build the new I-5 bridge will just divert Washington traffic to a soon-to-be more congested I-205. Can Oregon's leaders exhibit big-picture thinking just once?
You look at the Midwest, and they have toll roads everywhere, and it works. It helps pay for the maintenance and upkeep and cleaning the roads. I know I'm probably in the very small minority. If you toll the I-5 bridge only and not 205, all the traffic will divert north and south to 205.
I think you're right. Our team has had this very same discussion over the last day and a half. If you only toll I-5, you can bet the Glenn Jackson Bridge, the I-205 crossing, that's a 15 or 20-minute detour east, well, that's going to see a lot more traffic, won't it? And the potential fallout doesn't stop with more congestion on I-205. The Interstate Bridge Replacement Team, well, they're counting on the normal amount of traffic in its tolling projections. So if a good chunk of drivers are diverting elsewhere, those projections, they could be way off. Would tolls on the bridge then have to be raised even higher to close those projections? And would that just push more traffic onto I-205? A lot of questions remain, and the clock is ticking. The governor describes ODOT's budget situation as catastrophic and is pushing lawmakers to find a way to keep the agency afloat. Now, one of the things that they've been studying for years is a pay-per-mile tax. That's an optional program right now. It's called OR-E-GO, and it tracks drivers' miles and sends them a bill. But doing that on a statewide level, well, that comes with all kinds of thorns. Rural Oregonians will likely say, they have to drive more miles than those in the metro, so that's not fair to them. And then there's privacy to think about. The state potentially tracking where you're going and how many miles you drive. Do you like that? I can smell a legal challenge there. But a viewer named Stefan wrote to us last night to say funding for highway maintenance has been insufficient for years. With cars already made with layers of computers able to transmit information, drivers should get used to the idea that their mileage will be monitored and fees attached. It's not if, but when. We'll be watching the legislature real closely next year. I mean, as we always do. But following our segment last night, we asked you if you had any suggestions for funding options. Jim offered up this idea. A system needs to be put in place so that EV owners pay their fair share. Currently, their extra heavy vehicles are skating free of paying for the road damage they're causing and making no contribution to ODOT road improvements. We hear that a lot, Jim, especially as more people turn to electric cars, but it's not 100% accurate. While they're not paying a gas tax like those of us who still fill up at the pump, EV drivers are paying higher titling and registration fees. Now, here's how that works. Prices are based on the car's age and gas mileage. The better gas mileage your car gets, the higher the fee to offset what you're not paying at the gas pump. The EV titling fee is nearly $200, but that's a one-time fee. Here's a look at the registration fees. You can see the electric vehicle owners do pay more than double the fee that even the most fuel-efficient gas vehicles pay. That's done to offset what they're not paying in gas taxes. They can knock that fee down quite a bit if they enroll in the OR-E-GO. That's the state's optional pay-per-mile program. But if they don't, this is what they pay. And oh yeah, no matter where you live, no matter where you drive, if you live in Multnomah, Washington, or Clackamas counties, you're going to pay those extra fees as well. So EV owners, not exactly getting a free pass. They just pay their version of the gas tax up front during titling and registration. Melissa wrote to us, I think Oregon should implement a sales tax instead of a toll across the river. I do not understand why Oregon does not take advantage of all the people who visit Oregon by having a sales tax. It could help schools as well. Yeah, sorry, but that's been voted down many times. And we'll end on this one from Joe, who wrote, kicker, why are we giving back billions to taxpayers and then talking about deficits in funding? Makes no sense. Now let's talk about homelessness. 3 weeks ago, the city of Portland announced a brand new program to quickly connect homeless folks to city outreach workers. All they had to do was dial 311 and make that call. Okay, so it's been a couple of weeks now. How's it working? Our Blair Best joins me. Blair, you spent the day testing the system. What do you think?
Yeah, Pat, that's right. So as you mentioned, the program was launched 3 weeks ago, and so far, nearly 400 people have called this hotline to get connected with an outreach worker. So we took to the streets today to call this number with homeless people to see how it works. Many people on the streets don't have phones, so they were grateful that we were there to dial 311 for them. And how it works is they get connected with someone on this hotline. They ask a series of questions, their name, if they have a phone, if they have an email address, and then they ask their location. And that varies for a lot of people on the streets. And the challenge is the outreach worker then has to go and find them. But there are currently just 6 outreach workers employed by the city, so it'll take them about 3 to 4 days. So that means that homeless person has to stay in that location for that period of time in order for the person to find them. They'll then assess their situation and connect them with any services, if those services are available, that they would need, like shelter or treatment. So there's a lot of moving parts right now, but that's what we found today.
Okay, so when you were making those phone calls with the homeless folks on the streets, did you have to wait a long time to be able to get in? Was there a big queue there?
There wasn't, surprisingly. We had to, wait, I guess maybe 30 seconds, and someone answered the call and immediately asked those 3 basic questions, and then they said they would pass the information along to the city's outreach team, and then they wait. And there's sweeps going on, there's camp removals, so the fact that these people will sit there and wait 3 days for an outreach worker to go and find them is somewhat unlikely, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and it sort of reminds me of back during COVID when the state wanted all these 80 and 90-year-olds to go online with these high-tech resources to reserve a place to get their COVID shots. Now we're expecting folks who are living on the streets to have email and working phones, and I know a lot of them do, but not all of them do. And how realistic is it for them to wait around on a specific street corner for 3 or 4 days?
Right, it's not really that realistic, but the mayor's office did tell us that multiple people have been connected to shelter through this program, but they wouldn't give us an exact number. And going back, 397, nearly 400 people have been entered into this database, but without knowing how many people have been connected to a shelter or any other services, it's really hard to know the impact of this program.
Yeah, as always, we've been asking for the metrics, and the government authorities slow to deliver on those. All right, Blair, well, thanks for being out on the streets and testing out this new program. Sounds promising. I think the jury's still out, though, on whether it's working all that well. Thank you.
I agree.
Still to come on the story. We've done several reports on the big lawsuit out of Small Grants Pass in Oregon. It's soon to be argued before the U.S. Supreme Court. We told you it's a case of national importance, and the big networks are waking up and agreeing on that. NBC Nightly News did a story of their own. And later, Portland City Council made a decision today regarding those gas-powered leaf blowers. Plenty of you wrote into us with opinions when we first told you about a proposed ban last week. Now we have the answer to what's going to happen. We'll explain it all when the story returns. We're going to dip back into the homeless crisis for a minute. There's a huge legal battle down in Grants Pass that's starting to get national attention. Tuesday night, NBC Nightly News featured a story on the case that'll soon be heard in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. It possibly will shape homeless policy across the country for years to come. We've covered the case extensively here on The Story, bringing you updates every step of the way. Here's NBC's Liz Kreutz.
Grants Pass, Oregon, population 40,000. A small city dealing with a big problem.
Oh, God, look at that.
Over the past 2 decades, as outsiders moved in, housing costs went up, forcing a growing number of people onto the streets.
What's it like to be homeless in Grants Pass?
It is an absolute nightmare.
Helen Cruz, who was homeless here for 5 years, feels strict anti-camping ordinances, including fines for sleeping in any public space, violated her constitutional rights, the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment.
I have probably at least $6,000 to $8,000 in fines and tickets. Yes.
But the flip side, officials say, is a city dotted with tents.
Our city deserves to have the ability to hold people accountable to bad behavior. And ultimately, our citizenry cannot utilize park spaces.
A heated legal battle has now dragged on for years, and now the final decision is in the hands of the Supreme Court.
What's happening here in Grants Pass is a microcosm for an issue playing out in communities big and small across the country. And ultimately, how the U.S. Supreme Court rules in this case could determine how cities nationwide can navigate their homeless crisis.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is among a number of Democratic lawmakers taking the more conservative side of this issue, and in an unexpected political twist, hoping the current conservative Supreme Court will side with them too. Newsom's office petitioning to the court on behalf of Grants Pass, arguing that banning anti-camping ordinances has paralyzed cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, effectively blocking them from moving people off public streets.
These court decisions have really tied cities' hands, and they've frozen in place the status quo, which is truly unacceptable.
But Ed Johnson, who represents Grants Pass's homeless residents, says lawmakers like Newsom are deflecting blame and siding with the city for political reasons amid pressure from voters fed up with rising homelessness.
If the Supreme Court sides with the city of Grants Pass, what does that mean for other cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland?
Well, those cities aren't trying to do what Grants Pass is trying to do. Grants Pass wants to make it illegal on every inch of property 24 hours a day. The problem is if that's allowed, many cities will simply try to run all of the homeless people out of their community, and they have to go somewhere.
For Helen, who now cleans homes and lives at this church, the fear of the upcoming Supreme Court ruling is overwhelming.
I don't even want to think about what's going to happen. It's an uncertainty that nobody wants to think about.
A no-win solution when there's limited housing and nowhere to go. Liz Kreutz, NBC News, Grants Pass, Oregon.
By the way, the Supreme Court is scheduled to hear arguments in this case on April 22nd, with a final decision likely to come several months later. We will be watching and bringing you updates every step of the way. Now let's shift our focus to ambulance crises. And for once, we're not talking about what's going on here in Multnomah County. Nope, we're looking at the city of Salem. They're considering cutting ties with the private ambulance company down there that are providing services in the city and instead just doing the job themselves. They say that bringing ambulance services in-house would not only save the city money, it would likely improve the service reliability. Catherine Cook has our story.
For the last 9 years, the city of Salem has been contracting with private ambulance company Falck. Their contract ends in July of 2025. When that happens, the city is thinking about turning over all ambulance services to the Salem Fire Department, replacing Falck.
Quite frankly, it's not working.
Fire Chief Mike Niblock gave 2 reasons Monday night. First, he said Falck hasn't been meeting response standards. He also summarized why it makes financial sense for the city to take over ambulance services as a source of revenue.
Operating costs for the system about $10 million a year. We're going to have $12 million in revenue plus the GEMT, so $17 million in revenue.
GEMT stands for the Ground Emergency Medical Transportation Services Program. Back in 2016, lawmakers passed a bill allowing the program, which lets government agencies recoup some of the ambulance billing limits Medicare sets for its patients.
And for us, for For last year's numbers, that's $4.3 million in revenue that we're leaving on the table.
But the department says their motives are not all financial. Niblock explained that over the last 2.5 years, Falck has struggled to meet their weekly 1,030-hour service obligation. A recent study commissioned by the fire department showed in recent weeks, Falck has only managed around 600 hours. So in 2021, Salem Fire began staffing up 2 of their own ambulances to help meet the city's need. This year, they say that'll cost $2.2 million. For the firefighters union, that's frustrating.
Falck Ambulance has been subsidizing their business on the backs of my members with your money for 27 months. Enough is enough.
For its part, Falck says they only learned about the city's recommendation to move ambulance services in-house last week.
We simply want to be able to compete for the right to be your partner next year and are open to discussing system design changes, but we have to be included. This report was not shared with us and was not a collaborative effort. It has been rushed to council without proper vetting.
Catherine Cook, KGW News.
There was going to be a final vote this week, but Salem City Council decided they needed more time to consider the proposal. So now a vote on it will likely happen during their meeting on March 25th, about 2 weeks from now. Coming up after the break, will gas-powered leaf blowers soon be a thing of the past in Portland? Well, kind of. City Council voted unanimously on a proposal today. We'll explain which way it went and where things go from here when the story returns. The KGW Great Food Drive is going on right now. Safeway stores have an easy way that you can give. You can make a donation at the checkout pin pad. So far, we've raised enough to provide around 470,000 meals. How about that? Our goal is to top 1 million. And all this week, local Toyota dealers will match the first $10,000 donated. We also want to thank Rivermark Credit Union and Pacific Office Automation for helping us make this year's drive a great success. Now let's talk about leaf blowers. Exactly 1 week ago, Portland City Council heard all kinds of public comment on a proposed ban on those gas-powered leaf blowers. Today, the council voted unanimously to implement the plan that will fully ban the machines by 2028. So if you hate them, hang on, they're going to go away. But there is wiggle room until then. The first part of the ban doesn't take effect until January of 2026. It'll be a seasonal ban, no gas-powered leaf blowers from January to September. You could use gas between October through December, though, with the idea being that those wet, heavy leaves are kind of too much for the electric version. And then in 2028, gas-powered leaf blowers will be banned completely. Violations would apply to property owners, not contractors. So if someone's using a gas-powered leaf blower on your property, it's your problem. You'll be liable. You'd get a warning at first and then a fine starting at $250, and it's going to go up to $1,000. The city also says the program will be developed to offset costs for small businesses that experience a disproportionate hardship because electric leaf blowers cost a lot more than gas ones, apparently. More than 100 cities across the country have already banned gas-powered leaf blowers, including Lake Oswego. Multnomah County is working on its own ban. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. The good stuff is coming your way next. I'm taking the next couple of days off. Going to Seattle to bury my dad. He died recently at the age of 95. Had a great life. You're going to be in good hands with our Evan Watson. I hope you'll join him, and I'll see you right back here on Monday night at 6:30.